The first time I heard the word no on a free date, it was said like a joke. It was said like a shopping list. She leaned across white line table and lowered her voice like we're sharing summit in intimacy and asked, so Michal, are the land parcels is trust or are they in your name? The candle between us caught the edge of her earring. The whiter, however, behind her. He kept my smile steady polite, trying it automatic, while something in my case went cold and quiet.
In that moment I understood. She wasn't leaning in to know me. She was leaning in to price me. You don't know me, so let me back up. I'm Michael Anderson. I'm 40 years old, and on paper I'm the kind of man people call lucky. I own an agricultural company outside Lincoln, Nebraska. Grain contracts, cattle, equipment leases, storage. The kind of business that smells like diesel and soil even when you're wearing a suit. My place sits on land wide enough to make a man feel small, with a house that has more rooms than I need. At night the wind rolls over the fields and you can hear it in the glass. For years I told myself the emptiness was the price of building something real. Work hard. Keep your head down. Be grateful. My father used to say, a man earns his quiet. But the older I got, the more the quiet sounded like a question. The women I dated weren't villains. They were practical. They'd ask about my day, then my schedule, then my accountant, then my long-term plan. Once they learned what I owned, the conversation shifted. Not to who I was, but to what could be secured. That restaurant night, I drove home under a flat winter sky and pulled into my driveway like I was parking at a hotel I didn't choose. Inside, the house was warm, lights on timers, security system blinking green, everything working perfectly, except me. I poured a drink I didn't want and stared at a bowl of fruit that had been sitting there for days, untouched. I could hear my own footsteps. That's when the thought landed, sharp. Maybe nobody has ever met me at all. Here's the part where you might think, rich guy problems. Fair. But loneliness doesn't check your bank balance before it moves in. And I wasn't looking for pity. I was looking for an answer. So I made a choice that sounded crazy even as I made it. I decided to disappear. Not forever. Not a dramatic vanishing act. Long enough to find out what happens when Michael Anderson isn't in the room. I called my operations manager the next morning, Curtis, 58, steady as an old tractor, and told him I needed a few weeks away for meetings. He didn't laugh. He just asked, "You okay, boss?" I told him I was tired. He paused, then said, "Then go get your hands dirty. That always clears a man's head." I expected him to argue. Instead, he calmly listed what he'd cover, who he'd call, and which fires he'd put out first. The ease of it made me feel both grateful and strangely replaceable. By noon, I'd built a version of myself that could pass in any small town. Mike Harper. No college degrees, no glossy resume, just a work history stitched together from real jobs I'd done as a kid before the company grew. Fencing, irrigation, equipment repair. I bought a second-hand phone, a cheap jacket, boots without polish. I took my watch off, too clean, too expensive, and set it in the safe like I was locking away the last visible piece of my real life. The plan was simple. Find seasonal work on a family farm where nobody would Google me, trade labor for a bunk and meals, and live as the kind of man who measures his worth in hours, not headlines. Iowa made sense, close enough to drive, far enough to feel like a line drawn in dirt. I scanned listings until one caught my eye, family farm. Help needed. Room and board. No nonsense. Call Reynolds. When I dialed, a man answered with a voice like gravel. Reynolds. I introduced myself as Mike. He asked how fast I could start. I said tomorrow. He didn't ask for references. He didn't ask where I came from. That should have warned me. Instead, I felt relief, like I'd finally found a place where my name wouldn't matter. After we hung up, I sat there staring at the phone, and the real choice finally showed its teeth. If I went through with this, I'd be lying to everyone I met. I'd be inviting someone to trust me while I held back the truth on purpose. That's not noble. It's a gamble. And the question was, could I live with the cost, especially if the answer came back the way I secretly hoped? That night, I walked through my own living room, past framed awards and ribbon-cutting photos, and realized I was more scared of being seen than of being alone. I packed a duffel bag anyway. Then my phone buzzed. A single text from an unknown number. Be here at sunup. Don't be late. Reynolds. No welcome. No kindness. Just an order. Part of me wanted to turn around and stay inside the safe, quiet life I'd earned. Instead, I stepped into the cold and drove east through the dark. The highway was empty, the radio fading in and out, my breath fogging the windshield each time I exhaled. Near dawn, I turned onto a narrow gravel road and saw the Reynolds place, a sagging barn, a tired farmhouse, a yard full of machinery that looked like it had given up. A man in a heavy coat waited by the porch, arms crossed, not smiling. As I cut the engine, a door opened behind him and a woman stepped out with a lantern. The light framed her for a second, steady hands, tired posture, eyes alert like she'd learned not to expect help. I watched that lantern sway and felt something shift in my chest. Not romance, not yet, just the first sting of consequence. I had come here to be judged by my hands. And already, before I'd even spoken, I knew this place didn't care about my story. It would either break my little experiment or force me to become the kind of man who could tell the truth and keep it. I learned on my first morning at the Reynolds farm that pride has a sound. It's the sharp crack of a shovel handle when you hit frozen ground too hard, and it's the little laugh you swallow when your hands start shaking and you don't want anyone to notice. You're watching this, so you deserve honesty. I was not ready for how fast Mike Harper was expected to become useful. Before the sun cleared the tree line, Mr. Reynolds, Don, as he told me once and never again, sent me to repair fence. Old posts, brittle wire, stubborn soil. No orientation, no talk, just a nod toward the field like I was another tool he'd rented cheap. I'm Michael Anderson, 40, and back home I signed contracts that move grain by the rail car. None of that prepares you for a morning where your only measure is whether the line stays straight and the cattle stay in. By mid-morning, my gloves were soaked through. A blister rose under my thumb like a warning light. I kept going anyway. A part of this disappearing act was to feel something real again. Out here, the land doesn't care what you own. It only cares what you can do. Don watched from a distance. When I missed a staple and the wires snapped loose, he didn't yell. He just said, do it right or don't do it, and walk away. That sentence sat heavier than any insult. It told me exactly what I was to him. Temporary. Around noon, my stomach reminded me I'd eaten nothing but coffee. I drifted toward the house, then hesitated at the back steps like I didn't have permission to be hungry. That's when I saw her, Emma. She came out carrying a tray with a bowl of stew and bread wrapped in a towel. 36, maybe, but tired in the way people get when they've been responsible too long. She looked at my hands first, then my face, like she was checking if I'd made it through the morning in one piece. Don won't remember to feed you, she said quietly. He thinks work runs on air. I took the tray like it might disappear. Thank you. Eat, she said. Then go back before he decides you're lazy. I ate on an upturned bucket by the barn door. The stew was simple and hot enough to make my eyes sting. A ridiculous thought hit me. In my house outside Lincoln, everything tastes perfect and nothing tastes like this. As the day dragged on, I caught pieces of the family in motion. Don barking orders, Mrs. Reynolds moving through chores with tight shoulders, a son who barely glanced at me. Emma stayed on the edges, doing two things at once, never asking to be noticed. Once I heard her mother call, Emma, don't forget your place. It wasn't shouted. It was worse, casual. That evening the cold softened into damp Iowa quiet. Fireflies blinked near the fence line like tiny signals. I sat on the back steps because there was nowhere else to sit that felt like mine. I told myself to keep my distance. I told myself I was here to observe, not to get involved. Emma came out with 2 mugs of coffee. She handed me one and sat one step above me, careful not to crowd. For a while we just listened to the night. "You're not from around here," she said. I could have lied smoothly. I could have given her the rehearsed story I'd built for anyone who asked. That was the safe choice, the one that protected my secret. Instead, I offered a smaller truth. "Nebraska," I said. "Not far." She nodded. "You look like somebody who used to sleep indoors." I did, I admitted. A soft smile tugged at her mouth, then faded. "This place, it doesn't let people get comfortable. Not for long." "Do you ever think about leaving?" I asked. Emma stared out into the dark yard. "Every day. I think about the ocean. Like if I could stand in front of something that big, maybe I'd remember I'm not just what they say I am." "What do they say you are?" I asked before I could stop myself. She took a long breath. The extra mouth. The mistake. The one who should be grateful. My throat tightened. I'd come here to see if someone could love me without my money. I hadn't come here to watch a good woman get worn down by people who should have protected her. In my pocket, the phone tied to Michael Anderson sat silent and heavy, like a door I could open at any moment. I could make calls. I could fix things. I could also expose myself and turn her life into a problem I solved with a check. Emma looked at my hands again. "You're bleeding," she said. I glanced down. A thin line of red crossed my knuckle. Barely anything. Still, she held out a small bandage. Her fingers didn't touch mine. She kept it respectful, but the gesture landed like warmth. "I'm not taking care of you," she said when I mumbled thanks. "I'm just noticing." That word hit harder than it should have. Because back home, people noticed my car, my name. Out here, she noticed my hunger, my silence. When she stood to go inside, she paused at the door. "If you're going to stay," she said, "keep your head down. Don doesn't forgive mistakes. And my mother, she doesn't either." She disappeared into the house, and the porch light clicked off behind her. I sat there in the dark with a bandaged knuckle and a choice I hadn't planned for. I could keep playing poor and careful, letting this place be my test. Or I could start becoming the kind of man who doesn't just watch someone fade. And for the first time since I left Lincoln, I wasn't sure which lie was more dangerous that I stayed a minute longer, staring at the dark window. Inside, muffled voices rose and fell. Dawn's low rumble, her mother's sharp reply. I wasn't trying to listen, but one name cut through clear as a bell. Blake. Then, a number, 50,000, and the words "no other way." Silence followed, the kind that means somebody has already decided who will pay. My stomach turned. Not from hunger this time. I came here to test love. It sounded like this farm was about to sell something else. I clenched my bandaged hand and told myself, "Stay quiet, Mike." Then I heard Emma's door click, and I couldn't anymore. The gravel driveway sang "Under Tires" before I ever saw the vehicle. Crunch, slow, deliberate, pulled me out of the barn like a warning bell. I stepped into the yard with hay dust on my sleeves and watched a black SUV roll up as if it owned the night. Its headlights swept across the farmhouse windows, across the tired machinery, and then stopped. The engine idled, confident and patient, like it could wait forever. That was the moment my little experiment stopped being about me. I'm Michael Anderson, 40 years old, owner of a big agricultural company outside Lincoln, Nebraska, pretending to be Mike Harper, a broke seasonal hand on the Reynolds farm in Iowa. I came here to see if anyone could care about a man without money attached. What I didn't expect was to find a debt that didn't sit on paper, the kind that sits on a woman's shoulders. I'd heard the name the night before through the walls. Blake. I'd heard the number too, 50,000, and the words "no other way." All day, I tried to bury it under work. Fence line, feed bags, a broken hinge. Anything to keep my mind in the dirt. But when that SUV arrived, my stomach tightened the way it used to before big deals, because I knew this wasn't about crops. Don Reynolds met the vehicle on the porch like he was greeting a banker. His posture changed. His voice got softer. When the driver's door opened, a man stepped out who didn't look rushed by weather or work. 60 maybe. Clean coat. Leather gloves. A smile without warmth. He carried a thin folder tucked under one arm. "Harold Blake," he said to Don, not offering a hand. Then his eyes slid to me. And who's that? New help, Don replied. Mike. Blake's gaze stayed on me a second too long. Not curiosity, inventory. Then he nodded once and turned toward the house. The door opened. Emma appeared behind her mother, half-shadowed by the porch light. She wasn't dressed for company. Just jeans and a sweater, hair pulled back like she'd done it in a hurry. When Blake saw her, his smile widened a fraction. There she is, he said. Emma didn't answer. Her mother stepped forward instead, too bright. Mr. Blake, thank you for coming. I stayed near the yard, close enough to hear, but not close enough to be family. That's what I told myself. Stay out of it. Keep your head down. That was the rule that kept Mike Harper alive. Blake opened his folder on the porch. Papers rustled. Don leaned in. Emma's mother spoke fast about bad seasons, fuel prices, interest rates, words that made it sound inevitable, like weather. Blake listened, then said, calm as a man ordering dinner, we can settle this tonight. Emma's eyes flicked toward the yard and landed on me. Not dramatic. Just one clear look that said, do you see what they're doing? I did. And I knew what I could do if I stopped pretending. I could walk away and let my cover hold. Keep my secret and keep my hands clean. Or I could step forward and blow everything, my disguise, my test, the neat logic of why I came, by taking a side. Don's voice rose. Emma, don't make this harder. She shook her head once. I'm not a solution. Her mother snapped. Families do what they have to. Blake's tone didn't change. No one is forcing anything, he said, while standing there with papers that felt like a trap. It's an agreement that helps everyone. Emma took a step back, and Don moved with her, blocking the doorway. He didn't grab her, but he boxed her in like a gate closing. My feet started forward before my mind finished arguing. Blake noticed me approaching and lifted his brows. Something you want, Mike? I stopped at the bottom step. She said no, I answered. Don's face hardened. This ain't your business. Emma's mother hissed, don't you? Blake held up one gloved hand. Let him speak, he said, like he was being generous. Then he looked at Emma. Is he your friend? Emma didn't look at Blake. She looked at me. Please, she said quietly. Don't let them. That single word, please, killed my last excuse. Don reached for her arm. She flinched. I moved. It wasn't heroic. It was fast and messy. Don shoved me first. I caught myself, and one of Blake's men stepped in, broad shoulders, practice stance. He grabbed for my jacket. I drove my elbow back, felt it land, heard him grunt. The porch light swung, throwing shadows like a storm. Emma, go, I said. She hesitated, because she'd been trained to hesitate. Then she moved down the steps, breath sharp in the cold. Blake's voice finally lost its smoothness. Stop her. Don lunged for his daughter. I stepped between them. Don't, I said, and I meant it. Emma reached the old pickup parked by the barn. I'd left the keys in it out of habit. Thank God for habit. I backed toward the yard, keeping my eyes on Don and Blake. The hired man was getting up, swearing. Blake watched me, calculating, like he was deciding how much trouble I was worth. You don't know what you're doing, Don spat. I believed him. I also didn't care. I ran for the truck. Emma was in the passenger seat, hands clenched in her lap, eyes wide and dry. I slid behind the wheel, turned the key, and the engine coughed to life. Gravel sprayed as I threw it into gear. As we tore down the driveway, I caught one last glimpse in the mirror. Blake standing perfectly still under the porch light, phone already in his hand. And that's when the fear finally arrived, not for me, but for what I'd just started. The road ahead was nothing but darkness and two pale ruts. I drove by feel, listening for another engine behind us. Emma sat stiff, hands locked in her lap, eyes forward like if she blinked the night would swallow her. You didn't have to, she said. I did, I answered. I chose to. Back home, choices are contracts. Here, a choice is whether you let someone get cornered while you protect your own story. My real phone was buried in my duffel behind the seat. One call as Michael Anderson, and help would come fast. Lawyers, deputies, pressure. But that call would also turn Emma into a headline in my world, and me into exactly what I tried to escape. Headlights flared in the mirror, distant but steady. Emma saw them and went quiet. The truck's old engine groaned as I pushed harder. That's when it hit me. The next decision wouldn't be about love or pride. It would be about whether I could keep her free without buying her freedom. And if I failed, it wouldn't just be my secret that got exposed, it would be her life. Now, the motel key felt too light for what it was buying us. One thin door between Emma and the life that had been decided for her. I stood under a buzzing fluorescent sign that said vacancy, watching my breath fog in the cold. And I wondered if you can ever really outrun a place that thinks it owns you. I'm Michael Anderson, 40 years old, owner of an agricultural company outside Lincoln, Nebraska, still wearing the disguise of Mike Harper, broke farmhand. Emma sat on the edge of the bed inside room 12, boots on, coat zipped, as if comfort might be a trap. The pickup ticked as it cooled outside. Somewhere on the highway, a truck groaned past, and every time headlights slid across the curtains, she flinched. You sure they didn't follow us? She asked. I wanted to tell her yes. I wanted to hand her certainty like a blanket. Instead, I gave her the truth I had. I don't know, I said, but we're not staying long. She nodded, eyes fixed on a stain in the carpet like it could explain the world. In the dim light, she looked younger and older at the same time, young enough to still believe she could start over, old enough to know it might not be allowed. I went to the vending machine by the office and bought 2 coffees that tasted like burned pennies. When I came back, she took the cup with both hands and held it close, not drinking. Why did you do it? She asked. Back there. You barely know me. That was the moment the question I'd been dodging finally demanded an answer. I could keep playing the role. I'm just a decent guy who couldn't stand to watch. Or I could tell her the whole truth, who I was, what I owned, why I'd come to Iowa pretending to be nothing. My secret phone was in my duffel. One call as Michael Anderson, and I could make the chasing lights disappear. But I'd seen it too many times. Money solves the problem and leaves the person smaller. I didn't want Emma to feel like a purchase in a different wrapper. I did it because it was wrong, I said. Her eyes lifted, sharp. That's not enough. No, it wasn't. She deserved more than a slogan. She deserved a man who didn't hide behind convenience. I sat in the chair by the window and rubbed my hands together, trying to find the courage in my fingertips. I'm not proud of what I'm about to say, I told her, but I need you to hear it before anything else happens. She didn't speak. She just waited, and that quiet was louder than any demand. I came to that farm hiding, I said. I wanted to see if people would treat me like a person when they didn't think I had anything. Emma's jaw tightened. Hiding from what? From being used, I said. From being valued for the wrong reasons. She stared at me for a long beat, and I could see the calculation she'd been forced to learn. Is he safe? Is this another deal? Is kindness just the start of a trap? You're telling me you've been lying, she said. Yes. The word tasted like metal. Not about my feelings. About my name. About my life. Her hands trembled around the coffee. She set it down carefully, like if she gripped too hard something would break. Then why should I trust you now? She asked. Because I'm finally risking the one thing I was protecting, I thought. Because the mask is choking me. Because when you looked at me on that porch, you made me want to be better than my plan. Instead I said, you shouldn't, automatically. But I'm done keeping you in the dark. I didn't tell her the whole scale yet. Not the acreage, not the numbers, not the house waiting 2 states away. I told her just enough to make the next choice honest. I could take her to a safe place, but the safe place belonged to me. We left before dawn. The sky was the color of unwashed steel, and the fields were flat and endless. Emma watched the road signs like they were verdicts. When she saw Nebraska ahead, she turned toward me, suspicion blooming. This is your home, she said. It's where I can protect you, I answered. And what does that cost? Her voice didn't rise, but it sharpened. Do I owe you? That cut deeper than any punch. No, I said. You don't owe me anything. Not a thank you. Not a promise. Not your life. The gates appeared mid-morning, tall, electric clean. Cameras. A keypad. A guard's small booth. Emma stared as the metal opened like a mouth. She looked at me then, really looked, and something in her face fell away. Mike Harper doesn't live behind gates, she whispered. I swallowed, hands tight on the wheel. No, I said. He doesn't. And as we rolled up the long drive toward a house that would make my lie impossible, I realized the next person I had to convince wasn't Emma. It was me. She paced the kitchen once, like a caged thought, then said, I told you things I never say out loud. Her voice cracked. My mother calls me the extra mouth. My father looks through me. And you, she shook her head. I felt the urge to grab my phone, summon lawyers, make it clean. Instead, I kept my hands open on the table, choosing discomfort over control. For once, I waited. The front door opened with a keypad beep, clean, familiar, undeniable. Inside, everything was quiet in the expensive way. Polished stone, framed photos, air that smelled like lemon, and money pretending to be fresh. Emma's eyes snagged on a picture of me in a suit shaking hands at a county fair, and I watched her expression shift as if someone had pulled a chair out from under her. I could have stalled, fed her, let her sleep, explained later in soft pieces. But later is how people like Emma get controlled. One more day, one more promise, one more trap. So I chose the hard honesty. My real name is Michael Anderson, I said. This house is mine. She didn't yell. She just went very still, then asked almost politely, So even you weren't real? I was real with you, I said, and hated how thin it sounded. I set my phone on the table, screen down. You don't owe me anything. If you want to walk out, I'll drive you anywhere. If you want to stay one night and think, you can. No deals. Emma stared at the phone like it was a weapon, then lifted her eyes to mine. Tell me the truth, she whispered. When you grabbed my hand on that porch, was that for me or for your test? I opened my mouth, and nothing came. The first bell I heard wasn't a church bell. It was my phone at 6:12 a.m., sharp enough to split the quiet of my kitchen. Curtis, my operations manager, didn't bother with small talk. I'm Michael Anderson, 40, agribusiness owner outside Lincoln. I didn't run to Iowa to play hero. I ran to hide. Then Emma looked at me in my own house and asked the only question that mattered. Was I saving her or saving my test? Boss, Blake's attorney called, Curtis said. They're threatening criminal complaints in Iowa. Reynolds will back whatever story keeps the farm alive. The lie had followed me home. What do you need from me? I asked. You need to decide who you are today, Curtis said. Mike Harper with muddy boots or Michael Anderson with lawyers? Across the kitchen, Emma sat at the table, coat still on, hands around a mug she hadn't touched. The big house made her look like a guest in her own life. They found you, she said quietly. They found the story, I corrected. She met my eyes. You can fix it. With money. The old instinct surged, solve, pay, control. Then I saw what that would do to her. It would make her freedom feel purchased. I can fix it, I said. But I won't by you. Here was my choice. Crush Blake quietly and keep Emma hidden behind my gates, or step into daylight and end the leverage without turning her into my property. First, I said, tell me what you want. You. Her voice came out thin, like it wasn't used to being asked. I want to breathe. I want work where people don't talk over me. I want the ocean someday. And I want to stop feeling like I'm about to be taken. Okay, I said. Then we do this your way. 2 hours later, I sat in a glass conference room downtown with my attorney, Dana. Harold Blake arrived like he owned the air, clean coat, leather gloves, a folder tucked under his arm. He smiled. Mr. Anderson. So the mask comes off. You never cared about the mask, I said. You cared about control. Where is she? He asked. Not here, Dana said. Blake leaned back. Then we'll proceed. I'll file in Iowa. I'll make noise. You'll settle. I slid a document across the table. You're releasing the Reynolds debt in full. You're signing a no-contact agreement regarding Emma Reynolds. You're withdrawing any threat of criminal complaint. Blake chuckled. And what do I get? You get to walk away without me digging into every contract you've used to squeeze farms dry, I said. You keep your name out of the papers. Dana's eyes flicked to me. Risky. Yes. But the risk was finally mine. Blake's smile thinned. She'll run from you too. Once she learns what you really are. She already learned, I said. And she still deserves her life. His pen hovered. The room went quiet. Finally, he signed, slow, furious, controlled. 3 days later, a familiar Iowa pickup rolled onto my road and stopped at my gate. Don Reynolds got out, his wife glaring from a passenger seat. "You think you're better than us now?" Don called. I could have sent security. I could have handled it with letters. But Emma watched from the window, shoulders tight, waiting to see whether I would take control or give it to her. So I walked out alone and stopped short of the gate. "The debt is cleared," I said. "That's done. But Emma is not your bargain anymore. You don't contact her. You don't come here. If you try, it won't be a conversation next time." Don's jaw worked. "She owes this family." "No," I said calm. "She survived this family." They left in a burst of gravel. My knees went weak after. The way they do when you set a boundary you've never been brave enough to set for yourself. That afternoon, I drove Emma to a small stone church in Lincoln. Not for a show, just quiet and plain light. We sat in the back where nobody could claim us. "You get to decide what happens next," I told her. "Not your parents. Not Blake. Not me." I took a breath. "I lied to you. To protect myself. That doesn't make it okay." Her eyes glistened. "You tested me." "Yes," I said. "And I hate that about myself." I set my phone on the pew between us, screen down. "If you want, I'll help you get a place. Your name on the lease. A job. No strings. And if you never want to see me again, I'll accept it." Emma reached into her pocket and pulled out the small wooden lighthouse I'd carved in Iowa. She set it between us like evidence. "I kept it," she said, "because it didn't feel like money. It felt like being seen." My throat tightened. "You were seen," I said. "You are." Weeks passed. Emma moved into her own apartment. She got up early, went to work, came home to a door that only she could open. I kept my distance unless she invited me in, coffee, after a shift, a walk, quiet conversations where nobody demanded anything. Then one gray morning she stood on my porch and said, "If we do this, we do it without masks. No tests. No rescues." I nodded. Agreed. She hesitated, and her voice softened. "Did you live simply just to be with me?" I swallowed. Here was the last choice. Give her a romantic line, or give her the truth that might cost me everything. "No," I said. "I lived simply to find something real. And then you happened. And I chose you not as proof, as a person." Her shoulders dropped like she'd been holding her breath for years. She nodded once. "Then stay honest," she said. Next spring we drove to the Oregon coast. No private jet. Just a truck, snacks, a paper map. The Pacific was cold and loud and bigger than any mistake I'd made. Emma stood near the rocks with wind in her hair, one hand resting on her stomach, and I didn't try to make it a perfect ending. I just stood beside her, where I decided to stand. Because family isn't blood. It isn't gates. It's the person who sees the whole truth and chooses to stay anyway. I won't pretend I didn't feel terrified. A baby doesn't care about my past excuses. It doesn't care that I'm good at contracts or that I can win meetings. It just needs a steady man. On the drive west, Emma fell asleep against the window, and I kept glancing at her like she might vanish if I took my eyes off her. In the old version of my life, I controlled outcomes. Out there on the highway, all I could control was my next honest sentence. At the Overlook, she didn't ask for promises. She just took my hand, firm, practical, real, and said, "No more disappearing." And I understood that this was the real wealth I'd been chasing. Not comfort, but someone who would call me back to myself. I nodded, and for once the nod meant something. I wasn't agreeing to a fantasy, I was agreeing to show up on ordinary mornings too. Even when it's hard. Every day.